So I think the next presentation is actually what everybody's here for this evening, and that is information about the PARCC scores that we have received in grades 3 through 11. And I'm going to turn the program over to Mr. McKinney and the other administrators who will introduce themselves. They are going to need to come sit up here, and so I'm going to need the board to come to the back. I just want the public to be aware of a couple of things. Obviously, you all know that this year was very different in terms of receiving results. We only received results, high school results at the end of November. Beginning of December, we received elementary results, and they were sent to us electronically. We only yesterday, Mr. McKinney looked like Santa Claus because he was actually delivering the actual individual student reports to the individual schools. We are in the process of preparing all of those individual student reports for mailing. We hope that they'll get mailed tomorrow so that all of the parents shall be receiving next week their child's individual student report. Any student that did not take a test last year, their parents will receive a letter and their parents will receive a sample student report so that the parents can understand what kind of information the parents of students who actually took the exam received, and hopefully they will understand that the information is valuable not only to helping your child grow, but also to helping the school district identify some of the strengths and also how we can improve instruction. So having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McKinney and our administrators.
And again, Mrs. Ratner wants to talk about vacation days at PARCC. Joining me today, if we could just go around the room, Mr. Geiger, and just introduce.
Thank you. Frank Geiger, Principal, Columbia Middle School. John Morris, Principal.
Jessica Martin, Principal, English.
Bruce Yover, Supervisor of Mathematics and Relations.
Lori Scott, Supervisor of English, Music, and other things.
Good evening, Rob Nixon, Principal, Delaware Livingston.
So tonight's presentation is to share some of the information, the district PARCC level scoring information. Our secondary purpose is to present and help parents understand what an individual score report looks like and how to interpret those results for this new assessment. And finally, we're going to begin to talk about how we're going to use this new data to help us support our students and improve our schools and the instruction that our students receive. I do want to give a caveat from the right part of the slide that we don't have all the information yet. We are still waiting for additional reports that will give us more detailed information about claims and subclaims, which we will explain later in this presentation. We will also receive item analysis information, so we'll be able to look question by question for students and identify trends and information there. And at this point, we don't have any of the district comparative data for our neighbor schools or any of the other schools in our areas. That will be presented to the board as we create the data dashboard for this year. Hopefully, once those results come in, we can then plan to present that to the Board of Education and to our public. So we have some of the information. It is the very basic information, but we did feel it was important to, one, share how we did, and two, prepare parents for these individual score reports, because this is new. Without going into a great deal of background, the statewide assessment program is New this year, PARCC has replaced the ASC and the HESPA. That said, it's very, very important that we all understand that those tests are very different tests. The purpose and goals of those tests are different, and it's not valid in any real way to compare those previous results to the current results. That said, these tests are new and test generally the same grade levels of students and begin in the 3rd grade as required by law. How else are they different? And we talked a little bit about this with the student reps. It was a computer-based assessment. It's more interactive with the students, and the tools are built directly into the test, as are the accommodations for students who need those accommodations to take the test. The test that we took in the 14-15 school year had 2 sections, a PBA, a performance-based assessment that took place in March, and then an end-of-year assessment that took place in May. The 2 components were combined, and every student received 1 grade if they took the math and 1 grade for ELA. They didn't get 4 grade reports. There were just 2 sections of the test. And in addition, as the students indicated, the questions were more higher level critical thinking questions that required students to justify and explain their answers in more detail in written form. So a little bit different from the previous test, and going back to some of those other reports that we're waiting on, we expect greater information, and we should be able to support our students with that information once we receive it. This year, it's changing a little bit again. The tests will take place over 1 testing window. It will no longer be the PBA and end of the year. It will take place April into May, the testing window. And overall, pretty much every grade level is having a reduction in the total test time by approximately 90 minutes, depending on the grade. The other positive news is we anticipate receiving the results of that test by the end of June, early July, and we won't be sitting in December interpreting results. We will have the summer to do that. So that's what's coming up and different for this year. Scoring. We're very accustomed to partially proficient, proficient, and advanced proficient as test scores. The new PARCC assessment is graded on a 5-point scale, level 1 through level 5. Those colors don't translate exceptionally well on the PowerPoint, but it matches what the individual score reports will look like. Level 1 is not yet meeting grade level expectations, partially meeting at level 2, approaching grade level expectations at level 3. Level 4 is meeting, and level 5 is exceeding. So when we're talking about proficiency at these performance levels, we are including level 4 and level 5 as being proficient at each of the grade levels on each of the tests. So this is what a score report will look like, and this is how all of the graphs, the district graphs, are given to us on this scale. The last part of this puzzle, and what we're talking about, is we have this new information to use the computer data point, but we have not been sitting here doing nothing, waiting for these results to arrive and not figuring out how to help students. You know, the state has been very, very clear about how districts should use, and we have for many, many years been using multiple measures to evaluate, assess, and determine the needs of our students. So while we're getting all this great information and we're excited to have more information than we've had in the past, and we believe that it will help us grow, we haven't been sitting here waiting for this day. We've been moving forward and going there, and this is just one more data point. It's not going to, the test doesn't define our students, and not one test, single test grade can ever do that. So it's important we use this in combination with all of the other measures and all of the other assessments and all of the classwork and all the teacher input that's going into this, so that we know what our students need and how we can best support them moving forward. That said, I'm going to turn it over to the team who are going to share the results. We'll first start at the elementary results, then go to the middle, and then go to the high school to take a look at some of the information and some of our earliest observations. Again, this is very preliminary, as we don't have full reports, and we've only had this data for a couple of weeks. I'll turn it over to Mrs. White.
The slide that you're looking at, you're going to see several more versions of that same exact slide as we go through. So I just wanted to briefly point out, obviously those orangey salmon color bars represent the students in Berkeley Heights, but those are the students in all 3 elementary schools, in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. Underneath that represents all the students across the state of New Jersey who are in that grade level. And beneath that, where it says grade 3 park, grade 4 park, and grade 5 park, that row represents all of the schools that are part of the PARCC consortium across the country, which is 12 states as well as Washington, D.C. Going across, you can see the 5 areas that Mr. McKinney mentioned from level 1 through level 5 areas of proficiency. And the column all the way on the far right is a combination of levels 4 and 5 together. So all of the students who are at or above our expected level of proficiency. So without having to read you all of the numbers, you can clearly see at all grade levels we exceeded the state performance and really exceeded the PARCC consortium performance. We were very pleased with our elementary results. It's also important to note at this point that the PARCC test is a test of the skills mastered in the Common Core. Common Core has been a big topic of discussion for several years. We fully adopted it in 2010. And our curriculum, even a few years before that, was modified working to meet those goals of the Common Core. So we're pretty proud of our students' achievements and proud of the work that we do with our curriculum to get our students to show this level of proficiency. We do have some students that are struggling, who are at the lower levels of proficiency. You see small numbers, but they're nonetheless. It's also important to note that we tested all of our students. And so the range that you see really represents the different types of learning needs that we have in our district. And they are being addressed in different ways. And that's where we are with language arts. I'm going to pass it over to Patty for a discussion of the math scores.
Okay. When you take a look at the math scores, you'll see that in each of the grade levels, again, we score about 30 to 35% higher than New Jersey and higher than compared to all testing in the United States. Something to look at as we look at and we get the information in, obviously we've been very concerned with the lower levels, the levels 1 and 2. The other areas that we also have to consider is that last year was our first year for the Girl Math program. It was piloted last year. It aligns with the Common Core. And even with all those alignments, there were definite changes in grade levels of where those focused areas were and concepts. And even though we had done the mapping piece of it, there was some changes that had occurred there. The PARCC testing also, as the Go Math curriculum, is very heavily weighted with word problems to decipher and then use the applications of math. And that means reading comes into math as a skill level also, which makes it a more complex type of test. The last thing to consider with the math areas is that the math areas had many computer tools for the students that they needed to use in order to solve the math problems. We don't use computers and computer tools as we're defined on the PARCC testing on a regular basis in math classes. So even the knowledge of where you go for those menu items and recalling it, even though we practice this during the year, is still a new concept for the children at the elementary level. So that's an area that we continue to grow through computer instruction, through teacher support in those areas as far as the math component of it. And I'd like to turn over to Mr. Morrison, who will give you a further analysis.
At the risk of being repetitive, Mrs. Nard and Ms. Gasparini did a nice job speaking specifically to the math and language arts. And as you can see, in areas of 4 and 5, we far exceed the state average, and in areas of 1, 2, and 3, we don't quite meet the state average. That's really what we're looking for. We want to be above at 4 and 5 and below at 1 and 3. If anyone who's paid attention to our testing patterns over the years, the elementary schools are consistently inconsistent. From year to year, any one school or grade level can be a little bit above, a little bit below, or right on target, and that changes as the kids move through. And we do see trends from time to time, but we don't always. But the one trend that we generally have is that when we see a weakness, we target. And that's what we're already starting to do, meeting with our support teachers and our grade level teachers, and amongst our colleagues. We have many meetings throughout the course of the year, and we always end up talking about PARCC. It always comes back to what we do to better serve our students and move them over in their achievement levels. And right now, what we're focusing on with math is reasoning as an area where we feel like we need to get some new strategies and really put more focus. And also the language arts through the vocabulary, right? And writing has always been an issue of focus in these elementary schools.
And as we transition to Ms. Scott, one of the things that Ms. Nardi referenced was the core content area. Core content standards and our transition gap analysis, which was a long, involved process by a lot of people, teachers, administrators, which happened in 2010. And what that shows us, or what we feel good about, is these elementary scores, they represent the students who have known nothing else. They've lived the core content standards, and we believe that some of those results, while not perfect, are definitely heading in the right direction, and we feel good about those students as they continue on. The students in middle school and high school are the ones that lived the transition while they were in school, and so there's something that we have to delve into a little more closely.
These are the middle school scores for language arts. And again, not to sound repetitive, but we outscored the state and the PARCC consortium. And in keeping with what you've been talking about the elementary schools, going back to 2010, we've been looking at things we do to better align with the Common Core. A lot of emphasis on what we call close reading, as well as the different types of writing that the new test will call for. And one of the other benefits that we've seen in the middle school over the last couple of years is that we now have singular content teachers in language arts in 6th grade, which simply means our language arts teachers teach only language arts in 6th grade. And our current 8th graders are the students who began with that change. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the coming years. Sorry, Mr. Steele.
Yep. Switching over to mathematics, again, you're repetitive in 6th and 7th grade. We continue to outperform both the state and PARCC averages. It gets a little more complicated when we start to look at the 7th and 8th grade. In the 7th and 8th grade, we provide opportunities for our students to take advanced mathematics classes. So it's important to note in the 7th grade, 3% of the students at the state level took something other than the 7th grade assessment, meaning they took either an algebra or an advanced test. In our district, 26% of our students in 7th grade took Algebra 1 or higher, so they would not have taken the 7th grade assessment. When we look at the 8th grade assessment, 34% of the students at the state level took something other than the 8th grade assessment. In our district, 62% of our students took either Algebra 1 geometry or something higher. We continue to give our students advanced math, such as Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 options. Those students take those specific exams and do not take the grade level exam, so they will not be in that 7th grade data or in that 8th grade data. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Geiger.
Thank you. Good evening. So what do we see? For Columbia Middle School, except in the 8th grade math level, all scores exceeded the state averages. When we look at the 8th grade math, as Mrs. Diabros already stated, since our middle school students are placing both algebra and geometry, those higher level students are not included in that 8th grade math level score. There were some concerns actually at the state level regarding algebra and geometry scores, specifically at the middle school level. In other words, were we delivering the content? And I'm happy to report that CMS algebra passing scores surpassed the state scores by 50%, and that 100% of our geometry students scored at that level. Students in our advanced English classes did very well as well. Further analysis of examining sequence of math in middle school and looking at the reading subclaims. As anticipated, reading will continue to require a greater emphasis, and it's fair to say that reading skills reflect in both the language arts and our mathematics scores. And now we're moving to Scott.
That's me. Again, this looks just like the middle school, only it's the high school results. And again, outscoring the state and the PARCC consortium. In terms of looking forward, how we're going to look at these scores and what we'll do, looking at the same areas of writing and reading in both the information, particularly in the informational text, because that is a big emphasis on the new test. So we've been looking more and more at things outside of the traditional model that our students read. This was you again.
Okay. Switching over to the mathematics again, this slide here is showing our students that took Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2. This is comparing everybody in the district that took Algebra 1, Geometry, or Algebra 2 to the state averages. And again, you can see that we are outperforming both the state and the PARCC averages in all areas. One important note, this is the first time our students are actually seeing an end-of-course test at the Algebra 2 or the Geometry level. This is a brand new test, and this is the first time that students are seeing that type of a test.
So as we move through and analyze some of the scores from that level, I won't be the repetitive person to read the first slide again. But so some of the quick analysis, you take a look as you go across, looking at the simple numbers, they're made clear that there is a decline in overall high school scores, but the decline in scores as compared to the middle school, particularly in language arts, you'll notice that not only does it mirror that on the state and national level, those scores decreased, but closer analysis of the high school scores, particularly in language arts, will show that actually the performance, the difference, the gap moved, and our students performed exceedingly better than state and nationally as a result in that comparison. Taking a closer look at the subclaims for language arts and for math, some of the things that we can start to take a closer look at, for mathematics, we can take a look at the subclaims of modeling, reasoning, and the skills that are applied there, and we can investigate how we support our students further in those areas. And in the area of language arts, further examination of the literary portion of the reading subclaim, as well as the expression portion of the writing subclaim, are areas that, based upon these results, we feel like we could serve our students well by investigating further.
Transitioning from the district information to what the individual student reports or ISRs will tell us. Again, we've thrown around some terms like claims and subclaims, and that will give a little bit greater insight to. That is the terminology used by PARCC, and it is important that we know what they're referencing for this. Each student who took one of these tests, in English or in math, will receive 2 reports. The top of the report will look the same. It will indicate the student's score, the school average, the district average, the state average, and the PARCC average as a comparative tool for the parents to look at. So you'll see the overall score, which ranges from 650 to 850, and be able to make some comparisons there. The cut scores for each of the performance levels do not change from district to district or state to state, but the level 5 cut score can be different from test to test, which is a little bit confusing. It ranges from somewhere around 790 to 805 in that area as the minimum cut score there. Additionally, further down, now this is it's a clip of the top of an English report and the top of a math report. There's additional subclaim information, and Lori will share what some of the information is included on these subclaims for language arts. So,
If you look at the left side, that has the reading subclaims. I know, those reading. On the top are literary tests. novels, fiction, the kind of things we've always traditionally seen in the classroom. The next are informational texts. It's nonfiction, but it's kind of more than that. It could be essays, it could be a historical document, it could be a science lab, something like that, but it's not the fictional novel that we traditionally have seen for years and years in the classroom. Now, vocabulary. Obviously we know what vocabulary is, but it's not the vocabulary my generation did, where you had the 200 words that will help you succeed. It's understanding vocabulary in the context of things students are reading. So it is a much higher level skill, and it's not a memorization of a set of words. The writing side has two components. Writing expression, and then knowledge and use of language conventions. What you are looking at is, one is grammar mechanics, so do they know where commas go, that sort of thing. And the other is kind of the flow of writing, transitions, crafting an argument, word choice, and probably one of the most important things, citing evidence. That's one of the things I see my teachers working on quite a bit at all levels. That students will make a claim, but can they then back it up from what they've read? So that's the different sort of parts you're looking at. Again, not too far removed from what we've done before, but a lot more higher level skills are involved.
And each of those subclaim areas receive an arrow that will tell you a little bit more about your student. Down arrow is below expectations, side to side is nearly meets expectations, and the up arrows meets or exceeds. So you're receiving information not only how they did overall, but in what areas they may have struggled or excelled. So it's very much helpful information. We get that at the district level, which will help us greatly when we look at our curriculum and our instruction. But we will also be able to work with the students on those individual and targeted areas to support their growth.
So switching over to the mathematics side, again, we're broken down into subclaims, 4 subclaims up there. I'll talk about each one of those different areas. The first one that you'll see up on the left there is called major content. This is content that has been identified as the primary focus for the course or grade level that the student is being assessed on. Right underneath the major content, you will see a category that says additional or supporting content. I will say underneath each one of those categories, when you see the individual student reports, there's a little more information about what content falls into each one of those categories, and that will vary by the group. The additional and supporting content is content that is just as important as the major content, but it is content, for in the case of supporting, it's content that is critical for students to know, to be able to learn what's at that grade level. Additional content is content that is important for students to learn, doesn't support the major content, but it will be used in other years as the students move through their mathematics progression. As we move over to the right-hand side, now we're looking at their applications of this knowledge. We look at expression and reasoning. Students here are going to be asked some of the tougher questions of being able to take that content, apply it in those larger open-ended scenarios that are seen on the test. The last category down the bottom is the modeling and application, and that's where they're going to be using, depending on the level of the mathematics, they could be writing expressions, generating a graph, using a model of a particular situation, and then answering questions based on that model.
So we're giving you a great deal of information, but there are also resources, and we will continue. The principals will be presenting and sharing with PTOs, and this will be an ongoing conversation, of course. But there are several significant resources that are attached to this presentation that are included in the letters that are going home, that will be posted on our website, that are actually truly helpful. This one references a video, and we will not watch the video together this evening, but it's a pretty well produced video that helps explain the score report, and they're targeted towards explaining the information to parents. So there are several good resources that will help beyond this evening, and we will help disseminate that information moving forward. Of course, all of this, the goal is to work together to help our students move forward. One of the most frequently asked questions that I've faced as principal and as assistant superintendent is, what does this mean for graduation and graduation requirements? And this is a conversation that began last year. We released information. There's additional information this year. PARCC is not the only graduation requirement. It is one of many pathways available to students. And this chart, as it currently stands, will apply to every student that is currently at the high school. The class of 2016 through the class of 2019. It was extended into our current freshmen this year. And basically what the chart shows you is on the left-hand side is language arts, and the student has to meet one of those pathways, little oars in between each of those lines. So they have to pass ELA 9, ELA 10, ELA 11, or one of those categories to meet graduation, plus meet one of the mathematics pathways to achieve graduation beyond the credits and all the other state requirements for the students. So previously, the student had to pass the HESPA or one of the HESPA, the alternate pathways to the HESPA. This is the myriad of choices. It includes the SAT, the PSAT, the ACT, the PSAT, well, it's now just the PSAT, the ACT Aspire, the ASVAB, the AccuPlacer, and there's a portfolio appeal. So there's a myriad of ways, and we are trying, we are fortunate in this community that many of our students, almost all of our students take the SAT, many of our students take the ACT. We've begun testing all of our students in the PSAT so that they have as many opportunities as possible to meet one of these pathways and demonstrate their pathways for graduation purposes. The other thing to note is, while we talk about 4s and 5s as being identified as proficiency on PARCC, you can see in the PARCC levels that on the ELA 11, a 3 meets the graduation requirement, and on the geometry and algebra 2, a 3 is also acceptable. And that was adopted by the State Board of Education. They determined what those cut scores are, and it's somewhat of an indication of their concerns about this PARCC assessment because it's a new test, and we don't know what this new baseline is creating. So we're all going to learn this together over the next few years, but this is one of the most frequently asked questions. Will PARCC prevent my student from graduating? No, it's one of the ways they can meet that criteria. At the bottom, they're going to add some new lines to this as the new SAT arrives and the new PSAT scores arrive. There'll be new cutoffs because we're anticipating new scale scores. So the state board, this is directly from the State Board of Education, and they told us to be aware that this is changing. They thought December, it may not be until January. So, and just an overall summary, again, we don't have a great deal of information. We have some, and our preliminary looks allow us to say we are moving in the right direction, and we are achieving higher than the state standards. We know that there's more comparisons that need to take place. We know that this is a great amount of new data for us, and that's going to take some time for us all to get through and understand and make sure that we use it so that we take the power of that information and help students. It is a new baseline. It's a starting point. And the reality is, until we have 3 years, we may really not understand trends and what these numbers tell us. As we all know, this was a highly politicized test, and there's going to be different results. Different communities handle the situation differently for a variety of reasons. Our community, our students took the test, and we feel pretty good about the information that we're going to gather from that. But moving forward, we have to be cautious to overreact to this first year of testing. And finally, our job as administrators and teachers is getting this information into the hands of our teachers so that we can support our students and to make sure that we are providing every support that we can, professional development and otherwise, to support our curriculum and make sure that we are supporting our students. And this is just kind of an example of the things that we will be undertaking over the next 6 months until we administer this test again. I can't believe it's that close. But the first step is what did we learn about our students? And that's, we have to take this information and say, okay, compared to all the other measures, did they achieve what we thought they would, or are we learning something new? Or is it something that we need to disregard for individual students? We don't have the subgroup information, the special education comparative data, we don't have the ELL comparative data and that information. Is there a subgroup, economically disadvantaged students, that are doing poorly that we really need to address and target? Are there, once we get the kind of analysis, can we look at and identify any issues or holes in our curriculum that we can handle immediately and change and emphasize things differently? Or do we really have to rethink and rebuild what we're doing through the curriculum cycle? And then we have to identify the actions that are going to support our students and continue the remediation that's already going. And if we can take remedial math and say, you know, we should be spending our time on that model and a portion of that for that student and give them more opportunities to excel there. I think that that's going to be beneficial information for that student and help us help them achieve to the best of their ability. At the student level, we are comparing all of these scores to RAP scores, Fontes, Snell, COGATS, ASC, HESPA. All of this data exists. But we're also talking about the 180 days that we spend with your kids in our classrooms, and what are we seeing, and how are they performing? What are the GPA, the SAT, the ACT, the AP, what do all those things tell us about the whole student? And we need to figure out a way, there's so much information. How do we get that to teachers in a meaningful way? And how do we get those teachers with the resources they need to simulate, you know, the conversation I always had with, you know, teachers, should we be doing PARCC questions in class? No, we should be doing good questions in class. And if they happen to be PARCC questions and they require those critical thinking skills, then that's going to benefit them on PARCC, then that's what we should be doing. We should be asking good questions that require critical thinking skills and pushing those students to explore and expand in those areas. At the curriculum level, we really need more data, and we need to be able to sort and really drill that down to the course level, to the teacher level, to the honors level, to the regular level, and see what trends we can identify, and then how do we support the gaps or the holes that we find in those areas. And then we have to support that with the professional development opportunities. We have to look at budget, we have to look at planning, we have to make sure that our technology resources are there for our students. And you know, between those two things, we are going to continue to be a reflective school. We're going to continue to get better, and our students will continue to achieve. And that's where a lot of our work will be spent over the next 6 months and beyond. Again, these are some of the additional resources that I included in the presentation, so you can link to them later. But I would like to return to Mrs. Ratner.
There's a couple of things that I just want to make everybody aware of. First of all, I want to thank Peter Ellis. He's here this evening recording this so that any parents who aren't able to be here this evening could watch it on the website. And then hopefully before the PTO meetings where the principals will actually be talking about their respective school scores, and also parents will have an opportunity to look at their individual student reports so that you can maybe pose questions to the principals ahead of time, so in their preparation of their presentation, they can address those questions for you. The other thing you need to be aware of is today, I believe, the president signed an act to replace the No Child Left Behind Act, and it's called Every Student Succeeds Act. And in it, there's a number of different changes, significant changes, that we're looking at very carefully because we're not sure how they're going to impact things. I was actually at a meeting, Dr. Crisimino and I were at a meeting today with the state board president, and he indicated that we're going to be looking at testing, and it may mean that we're going to do something like Massachusetts has done, and that is buy some PARCC questions, develop our own, and come up with a whole new assessment method. The new law, federal law, says that people have an opportunity to opt out. But we don't know what that means in New Jersey, because it returned a lot of local control to the state level. So even though the federal level may be a certain way, actually the New Jersey requirements might be higher. So we're going to be watching those things very, very carefully as we continue to move forward. But I just wanted you to be aware of some of those changes as we're going through all of the data that we received, and there's still some changes that may occur as we move forward. I want to say thank you to all of the administrators, not just the ones presenting this evening, but everybody, because we have focused a lot of energy on looking at data and helping that data to inform our decisions. And as Mr. McKinney emphasized, this is one point in an overall continuum of data that we look at in terms of students and their success and how we can help remediate them and help them to continue to be more successful. So having said that, I'll check with the board to see if any of the board members have specific questions for us. Mr. Singhaglia?
The overall, with the math scores, you said the GL, did that include the middle school kids who took those tests as well?
Yes, sir.
It did, okay. Mrs. Scott, how was the, on PARCC, how was the writing section scored? How was that scored by the state?
I mean, what are they looking for, or the actual math involved?
Well, I mean, was it,
I mean, literally are they read, or are they being machine read?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
yeah.
Yeah, no, this is open-ended. The test, there's more like two-part questions and things like that, so although you look at it and you say, oh, it's electronic, then they have to be read. There are a lot, there are multiple choice, but a lot of the questions are, what you would think of as that open-ended or dependent upon the earlier question.
And I guess, I mean, I'm just curious on what criteria they use, because obviously it's different people reading. And is it similar to how the SATs were handled, have been handled?
Correct. Rubric-based scoring.
Yeah.
But by people, multiple readers, if there's a disparity, there's additional readers.
And that's, I guess, my question is that's done obviously at the state level, but how does that then compare with this PARCC consortium? Because
It's actually scored at the PARCC level.
it's all sort of the PARCC level.
Yeah.
Pearson is responsible for scoring.
Pearson is responsible for all scoring, and all scoring is done by the floor regardless of where. New Jersey was far ahead of most other states as far as using technology. We use, I think we're 98% computer-based testing. Many other states were not there yet, so there was a lot of pencil and paper. But the other part of it, that was one of the reasons behind the two-part, the PDA test and the end of the year test. The PDA was more open-ended writing, where the end of the year was more multiple choice selection, highlight, stuff that could be computer graded and turned around more quickly. So that's yet to be seen with the new test, smashing all of that together.
Okay.
The other thing is, Mr. Singhaglia, there are already on our website sample questions at grade levels and answers. And one of the things that we're looking forward to getting is we're supposed to get some of those sample writing samples back with rationales for scoring. So that's something that we haven't seen before, so that should be very helpful to us also. Mr. Swan?
We've gone at great, first of all, thank you. We've gone at great lengths to create our consortium of schools for our blocks. I've been on this board 11 plus years. We've always exceeded the state average. Never tested everything. So coming out here and telling us that, where do we stand against our?
We still don't know, and that's what we said, we will not get that information until probably late January, is what I heard today. We initially were told, everything they tell us initially, and then it seems to get bumped back 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm hoping that by the end of January, we will have that information. School districts are doing just like we're doing. We're doing a presentation, and that information is going up on websites. So we're gathering some of that information, but until we actually have access to it, we're not going to be able to do as much comparison.
The other thing I've heard is that this is giving us some information. And it may take us some years to figure it out where we're going with it. But all the tests that we've always had problems with language. Our numbers have been down. This bill is still down, it's on language.
Actually, at the elementary level, it's reverse. It's typically the other way around. Our language arts scores are lower and our math scores are higher. And actually, at the elementary level, that reversed. But it, right,
But that always been down in all the tests.
but we don't know.
Besides the schools that we have now, they've always been down. I don't think we need to wait.
But we're not leaving. What we're saying is that this was a new test. We're expecting that the information that we're going to get in response to this test is going to help us. Whereas in the past, we've given tests, we've gotten scores, but we have not had access to the actual tests. We have not had access to the way that those things were scored. For us, this is definitely a move in the right direction in terms of informing us more. We're continuing to make adjustments, and I think the other thing that's important that was stressed at the beginning is that, our high school students have not been taught using Common Core. That they have been, but not as long as, our elementary students, that's all they know is the focus on critical thinking and analysis and things like that. That doesn't mean we should say it's okay to not do as well, but it is something that we've transitioned and we continue to transition and we have to get better with in terms of, what we're doing with our students.
My last question is, taking all the information that we with the new system that we just put in place, maybe do scoring and see, we can take all the students and put them into, who have about 30, and get a list of all the students at 30 and say, okay, they need to do better reading or analysis work. We have that tool now, right? We did the Google Docs, pull out information and sort that way.
Yes, we're actually using mostly pivot tables with Excel in order to really delve into the data a lot more than we've had opportunities to do in the past. I think one of the things that we seem to forget is that as teachers, we're focused on pedagogy and we're focused on content, and we haven't always been focused on data analysis. And that is something that has kind of been pushed on us, and we've really been trying to ramp up so that we're doing a better job at it. But it's not something that is second nature for a lot of people. So it is something that we're continuing to provide professional development for. And we do have people in the district who really have expertise in that, like Mr. Finley and Mr. Ziobro. Actually, they're some of the people that have been providing the other administrators with some training so that we can better analyze information. Mr. Casana?
Do we have the scores on all the sub things now, or is that?
Not yet.
But it seemed like in some of the improvement areas, you had a feel, or, for instance, vocabulary did we just get not a score, but just kind of?
Well, we got the individual student report.
We have individual students and we have district level, but we don't have the ability to manipulate anything yet.
Okay, so you saw the numbers at the level, on the side of things, at the level that you showed us, the state, the whole system, and Berkeley Heights, but it's just not useful yet.
Correct. We don't have the full reports. We have summary information, but we don't have the ability to manipulate and identify trends by, say, level that the student's currently in, or course or classes. So we can't maneuver. We can see some general overview information.
So at some point you'll come back with the sub information because of that. Are percentiles gone? Are we not going to get percentiles? That's just,
I don't anticipate percentiles. The other thing that is of concern, we'll get them back just for you. One of the other concerns that we expressed today is, again, we the Pearson and the test administrators did not set up any way of determining whether or not a score was a valid score. So, as a superintendent, I said today, it seemed like an easy thing. If a student completed a test in 10 seconds, it can't be a valid score because they probably just went down and marked A's. Or if, they went A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, that's probably another indicator that it's not a valid score or whatever. And that was not built in to the test. And that to me seems like a simple, logical thing to do, particularly if it's being done on a computer. So, they told us that they are looking into it to make sure that they can, in some way, determine that, something is an invalid score because of the amount of time spent on the test or the pattern that was utilized for answers. But again, that's still something that we're waiting for an answer for, because it's something that was raised 3 years ago when I was at a national consortium at PARCC, and they couldn't figure out a way to do it, so they just kind of set it aside.
And then we think we're going to get I said we have 4 years out, but are we going to get the scores for this coming year early enough to use for instance with respect to like the algebra or?
They're claiming that we should be getting
Is it a
scores.
claim or a subclaim?
Very well, maybe a subclaim. We're expecting that we should get them by the end of June.
Just one of the comments. So if you listen to the commissioner, the Department of Ed, and the State Board, they're almost backing away from PARCC as an accurate measure of achievement. And you're seeing a different tone than when they were first rolling this out last year and a couple of years ago they were talking about. So now they're talking about this as one measure of achievement and talking about how you know the validity of scores are. And they never really spoke about that before. And it was very clear today that PARCC, as we know now, probably will be very different as they move forward. So it's kind of interesting to see that a lot of what was being said at one point is sort of being backtracked now as I guess the scores came out and it's not what they were going to do, kind of feedback from other people.
And then the other concern that we have is, that slide that shows all the different pathways for a student to meet a graduation requirement. So if a ninth grader meets the ELA requirement, then why would they bother to take a 10th grade or an 11th grade test? And then that's going to impact the overall scores of, the district. So how do we take that the information we are getting and validate that we're still doing what we need to do? So that's another task that we're going to need to focus on.
How does the state respond to that? That's a very valid point. I mean, we're going to have, I'm sure, a lot of kids who will meet the requirement early on in their high school career. What's the incentive? I mean, taking the SAT is another story, but too many orders.
Exactly, there are too many oars in the water. They didn't really have a response to that. They, indicated that they were more concerned that there were multiple ways for a student to meet a graduation requirement. The other thing I started hyperventilating on was they were kind of alluding to the fact that the current freshmen, they may change those requirements before the end of this school year. And I said, well, how can you tell them that this is a requirement and you're going to change it after you've indicated to them that that's what it is? Again, I am usually very vocal and express my concerns. Sometimes they're heard, sometimes they're not. Any other board members with questions? Yes. But I've been in education for 34 years. This is the first time we're getting test information that really is helpful in terms of you're actually seeing some of the questions that were posed and you're seeing responses. They've never done that before. So that really is helpful to us. And we're more hopeful that that's going to be refined and there'll be something that comes out of that. That's very positive. Mrs. Kerr, should I ask if the audience has any specific questions for us? Is anyone in the audience Megan?
And we're, we feel this can you tell if you're looking at student reports, can you correlate a given student report with an exception that occurred when they were taking the test? Like my daughter took a section of math and didn't submit. So she was a 0 on that section and we couldn't make it up, it wasn't able to make it up. So does your report on a given student break down such that you can see that 0 and then that's why you know that the rest of it is lower than it should be?
I'm hopeful that the next batch will be able to break it down so that we can look, the next batch of information. There is some of the information in a database but it includes more of the demographic information than anything else. I'm hoping that what they're going to do, and what it appears that we'll be able to look at section by section what the students did, what test version they took. Right. So we'll be able to break it down into versions, sections, and really have a better idea of what took place. And we will have all the information about where they took that. Yeah. If it impacted the entire room, not just one student or,
So in the meantime, I'll get that student report and I'll take a breath and I'll
And but at least,
but it's
a student was able to share that this occurred.
Yeah, it was documented or whatever.
Right, so, that's the caution, and we don't know, and the students will know better than anybody else of the effort that they placed on that.
There's a lot of different reasons for it,
Exactly.
right? This is just one particular that could yield a result like that. And
Correct.
We're dealing with a range of activities
Absolutely.
around the park.
And I think that's another important factor. I will always tell you that you need to advocate for your child. But when you look at these scores, you need to identify questions that you have. And obviously, I would say that you should direct them to the principal, and that principal will either answer them or direct you to an administrator that can delve into it a little bit more for you. And the reason that we kind of did this meeting now and are scheduling the PTO meetings in January is to give everybody time to process the information so that you can ask questions. And I'm sure the principals are going to get, a cadre of questions that they're knowing. This is something I have to address because a lot of people didn't truly understand what this meant, kind of thing. Any other people in the audience that have questions for us? Mostly everybody's still got it. Thank you.